Hey up and welcome to the strategy sessions. Andi Jarvis here, I'm your host and here to help talk you through the next 55 minutes of marketing discussion and debate. Today, the main guest is a German guy by the name of Aris Stamatis. I tell you all about where I met Aris. Well, I haven't actually met him on the video, but suffice to say, the outfits are different today. If you are watching on YouTube, and I know not many people do, and that's fine, you're in for a treat. So if you're only listening to the audio, at some point, just go and have a look on YouTube because I'm wearing something that I don't typically wear, not a huge amount anyway, maybe 3 times a year. And it's all Aris's fault because he talks about he is a huge fan of wearing a tie. So I thought, you know what, got to have some standards. I'm going to have a tie on as well. Obviously for this intro, didn't bother, just went with an orangey yellow jumper. However, dive in and have a listen. It's coming up shortly because Aris is a brilliant thinker, really different background to a lot of strategists and a lot of people who get into advertising as an industry. I'm really interesting to listen to. So he's coming up shortly. But first, you've got a top tip coming. So are you ready for it? It's a TOPTIP. TOPTIP. We didn't get a top tip from Aris. It was just the way the interview went. We didn't get one. So I thought, I know, I'll get a guest, somebody else to do one. And then life took over and I forgot. So I thought, I'm going to give the top tip today. So here's the top tip from Andi Jarvis. It's coming up to Black Friday. If you haven't started planning for Black Friday yet, you're probably a little bit too late. But if you wanted a few last minute tips, go back and listen to the Black Friday episode with Luke Carthy from last year. Luke gives a couple of great last minute tips of things you can do to really try and make the most of Black Friday, even if you're a little bit late and behind the curve on this. So go and have a listen to that. There's a link in the show notes. You can find it there. Check out Luke's advice. Perfect for e-commerce businesses. So yeah, there you go. There's my TOPTIP. Enough singing, time to have a listen to Aris and to see what he has to say about strategy, really. That's what we get into. We geek out on it. And just as a last sales pitch before we do, digital marketing strategy course with the University of Vaasa. Again, link in the show notes. If you're here because you're interested in strategy and you want to find out more, go and check this course out. €249. You wouldn't want to miss it. Anyway, here we go. Aris. So today, my guest for the strategy sessions is Aris Stamatis. They say never meet your heroes, and I think that's rubbish because today I am meeting one of mine. LinkedIn, if you are a regular user, can be a bit of a strange place. There's a lot of interesting people and a lot of people doing a lot of self-promotion. I think I'm one of them, and a lot of people trying to sell lots of things. Aris, I've met via LinkedIn, and one of the reasons I say he's one of my heroes is every time I get a notification that says Aris has left a comment, I know it's going to be brilliant and I know it's going to be insightful and I know it's going to add to the discussion. So when I started planning season 2 of the podcast, I was like, who do I want on? Aris was one of those people. So I'm so pleased to have you on the show today. Aris, welcome to the strategy sessions.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure's all mine.
Bit embarrassing, but yeah.
Well, look, I didn't warn you about that introduction, so yeah. The pleasure is all mine. So thank you for coming along today. So, when we're planning this series of the strategy sessions, one of the things I wanted to do is have more strategists on there, and that's what you do. So before we talk about your career, let's just start with a really simple question. What does strategy mean to you?
So yeah, we talked about it a little bit. I think to put it in very simple terms, it's the things you do to achieve a goal, and that leads to the to a discussion. We try to avoid it, but I think it's necessary to for the definition. There's a lot of discussion about is strategy different from execution? Is one thing strategy, the other thing is planning, strategy versus tactics, and I think it's more or less all the same. Like if you have a good strategy, which means you know what you are doing to achieve something, you'll have both. You'll have planning in advance and then the execution, and I don't think you can really draw a line between it. So if you want to have a good strategy, you need a good plan, a good execution. if you don't have a plan, you'll still have a strategy, because you'll be doing something. When you don't do anything and just have plans, you have basically nothing. It's not a strategy. That's my personal definition. I know that people do draw a line between strategy. There's another line between deliberate and agile strategy. I think it all comes down to what do you actually do. So yeah.
I think I have a view sometimes that this demarcation between strategy and tactics is pushed hardest by strategists. And I often think it comes back to the history of strategy, which is from the Greek as leader of the army, I think is the etymology of the word strategy. And I have a feeling a lot of strategists like this position of feeling of importance and leadership and things like that. So we like to say that our discipline is different and separate, and therefore we like to keep it apart from execution. But if you have that view, you just have a piece of paper, don't you? Is that it?
Yeah, it's a piece of paper, and I think if we talk about war and the Greek, if you come up with a plan, everybody would be like, "Yeah, that's brilliant. Let's do it."
Yeah.
And so I think if you look at strategy, at the history of strategy and advertising, that maybe might explain why we try to make it a noble discipline. That's how somewhat set apart from execution, because historically advertising agencies didn't earn any money with creativity. They took a commission for the media placement, so that's why they are called agencies. They sold ad inventory on behalf of newspapers, for example, and then they tried to create some differentiation between the different agencies, and that was creativity. Mm-hmm. And then they discovered market research. Ogilvy was very famous for using this. And then the next thing was, there was quite a big change. Someone had the idea, why do we work for a commission? Why don't we take fees? We'll still have loads of money to earn, and we can be cheaper than the other agencies. So I think the strategy came up as a discipline to avoid the price competition. Mm-hmm. So you had to add something and say, okay, I'm not cheaper, but with us, your money works harder, because we have a strategy department that does all kinds of stuff. And so you don't have these weird genius coming up with some creative stuff. There's actually a strategic idea behind it. Mm-hmm. So, you want to have a clear line between strategy and creativity, because if you have the mad genius, who's the creative guy, strategy has to be different. You can't have a mad professor that's very much like the creative. You need to have someone else. So I think that's why they insist on this border between the two disciplines. And mm-hmm. I think historically it hasn't been this way always. There has been advertising before strategy. When you see Mad Men, they're doing strategy all the time, but it's just like, okay, how do we tackle this? What's the problem? What can we promise? What's really relevant? That's what Ogilvy does. And in the end, if you focus on creativity, strategy can give you some insights, but in the end, it's you don't deliver the strategy with your ads. So the creators have to work for themselves. You know? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't think it's useful to have a line between the two disciplines, or to have I think it might even lead to silos. Like you have a strategy, you present it to the client, and then you show the ads or the creative ideas you have, and the client goes like, okay, where do I find the strategy in the ads? That's
yeah, and the great ads, especially, you have to remember that the consumer never sees the strategy, right? So the two things have to work together. I often in very simplistic terms, describe to clients, strategy is where we're going, tactics is how we're going to get there. So if I said I was going to come to, my strategy is to come to Hamburg to meet you, if I don't have any tactics, then I'm still going to be sat here in Belfast. If I only have tactics, so I know I'm going to have to drive somewhere, I'm going to have to get a plane, I'm going to have to take a bus, then a train, that's wonderful, but I might end up in Munich. So, and I've landed in the wrong place. So, but if you put both together, and I have a strategy, where am I going to go? Hamburg to see Aris, and the tactics, I'm going to drive to the airport, jump on a flight, the flight's going to take me here. We'll end up in the same coffee shop 18 hours later, having a coffee, doing this discussion in person. So those two things have to work together. One's not more important than the other.
There's even one guy, Klaus Brandmeier. He's quite well known in Germany. He's a bit old school, but he worked a lot on branding and strategy. And when he worked for clients on the company side, he said, "I don't want my advertising agency to deliver anything on strategy, because in the end, it's just the ad. We don't deliver the strategy along with the ad, so it has to work on itself. Mm-hmm. And I don't want them to waste any time."
When you're paying them.
And I don't even want a presentation. Just give me the ads, if you like, put it in a magazine so I can see the context, and that's it.
Yeah. You touched about the presentation there, so I'm going to maybe ask you about that. When you present strategies to clients, how long and involved is that presentation? Are you of the let's keep it short and sweet school, or are you 2 hours of here's all the research and here's the reasons why, or somewhere in between?
I think it depends on the job, and it depends on the client. Some clients like to have all the information. Sometimes you present to a client who's not actually in charge, so he has to take your stuff and present it to someone else. And so in order for him her not to get lost, you need to provide some more insights. And sometimes the job is too complicated to have just a very simple line, but sometimes it can be very simple. I've seen, for example, pitch decks from different agencies for the same client, and one was very elaborate, like, this is our agency, this is what we do. They've worked for the same client in the past, so they had a kind of reminder, see what great things we have done together. And you were like 50, 60 slides in when they came to the strategy and then the creative ideas. And then there was Whedon and Kennedy, and they had like 3 or 4 slides maybe.
That's music to my ears.
I think they must have put a lot of effort to make it this short.
There's the line which is often attributed to Churchill, although it could be to Lincoln or anybody, but where he said, I apologize for delivering such a long speech. I didn't have time to write a shorter one. Which could have been anybody. It was probably Tom Sawyer or something. I don't know. But
a note from Voltaire.
Yeah, Voltaire. Then there you go.
Voltaire writing to Frederick the Great. Sorry for writing so long. I didn't have time to make it shorter. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're perfect. And it probably was Voltaire. That sounds better than Churchill, at least. But it's true. 4 or 5 slide decks. The thought, what's been in there, having to kill your darlings and cull all the excessive and useless information out of that, and just keep it to those 4 or 5 is...
Yeah, in the end, it's what you make of it. That's the really interesting part about strategy. So maybe the strategy itself might sound a bit too simplistic, but when you see what you can do with it, it might be the right way to do it. So it doesn't need any explanation. If you need too much explanation, it might be an indication that it's probably not that sound. Yeah. And it's interesting to look if you see companies doing strategies for themselves, so they don't really have to put a price tag on it. It's just something they will work with. It tends to be much more simple. Like, I once worked for Barclaycard, that's ages ago. and it was for loans, private loans. And the direction you are usually heading is we can't sell just money. It's about dreams, wishes, all that stuff. And they were like, no, we exactly know why people apply for a loan. They apply for a loan because they ran out of money and then their car broke down. They need a new washing machine. They are self-employed and the client didn't pay them. Very simple stuff like that. And if you talk about like, hey, it's FIFA time. Do you want a new TV? And you're like, what are you talking about? My car just broke down. I don't know how to go to work, and I'm self-employed. My bank won't give me a loan. So that's is there a word like this? Counterproductive?
Yeah.
You send a message and the guy's like, what are you talking about? So they forced us to be very, very straight and simple and say, okay, you don't have to be explicit. You don't have to say you are self-employed and don't get any money from your bank, but give him a key that you are talking about him or her. And he knows what situation he's in. I'm always saying he, I should be more she, but
not everything needs that higher purpose, does it? And I think sometimes ad agencies and strategists and even creatives are sort of obsessed with moving up the benefit ladder so that we can find this higher purpose for everything. You know, in loans, it has to be about joy to your life or allowing you the holiday of your dreams and X, Y, and Z. But actually, like you said, sometimes you just need to get to work, because without being able to go to work, there's no money coming in and you have bigger problems. And really crisp, clear, strategic thinking like that. I love that. And I love when I go in somewhere and they show me last year's strategy or the year before, and they give me 60, 80, 90, 200 pages. I'm like, I know I can do a job here. that's where I say, yes, I know I'm going to do well here.
Another example would be Oatly. Oatly, historically, they are around since the 90s. And they started as a way to use, it came from two directions. They had a lot of oat in Sweden. They cancelled public funding for oat farmers. And it's a thing, it grows under harsh conditions, but there's not much you can do with it. You can feed it to horses or make porridge, but that's about it. So they had to find a way to make money with oat. And then came this scientist, I can't remember his name, and he was like, I have an idea. I know how to make a drink out of oat. So this is how they got started. And they had the product, but they didn't have a strategy. They just had the execution. And they were like, okay, what can we use it for? Can it be a fitness drink? Can it be some low-calorie milk substitute? And then there we have it, milk substitute. But they didn't explicitly say, in case you don't want or cannot drink milk, here's your alternative. They didn't do that till they changed the management. And then there's actually a lot of information and a lot of choices in this very simple sentence. It's like milk, but made for humans.
There's a lot of great things.
It's really simple.
That line.
It's so simple. They struggled to get a trademark for it, because in court they said, God, it's so bloody obvious. Why do you think it's worth protecting? And but the thing is, as soon as you name it milk, you have you don't have to establish a new habit. Like, I have a new fancy drink this. Yeah. You change an existing habit. You have a category which is dairy. Dairy is a really nice category because in any supermarket, it's the category with the highest profitability. So that works for the retailers as well. And you have the opportunity to talk about not everybody can digest milk. It's a huge market. Most people don't know, but it's I think it's 10-15% of the population. And so this is a very clear strategy. You have a reason, even if you have no digestive problems, you might have other issues like I want to save the planet, I'm vegan, there's all kinds of stuff going on. So as soon as you clearly state this is competing with milk, you have the product, you have the category, you have the placement in the supermarket, you even have a rollout strategy if you're doing your international rollout, because we are talking about markets with a strong dairy category, which would be Northern Europe, UK, the US.
Yep.
Now they are expanding to China because it's so big, but it's so much easier to tell people, if you like to drink milk, and we know you do, try this.
Yeah.
It's so much harder to say, okay, you don't drink milk anyway, because in Asia, I think it's 60% of the population who can't really digest milk. So there's no habit to consume dairy products. That's much harder to enter this market. They do it via Starbucks, like they did in the US. But so it's to come back to it's milk but made for humans. It sounds very simple, but they made some very important choices to say it's not a fitness drink. It's like porridge but made for drinking.
Yeah,
it's milk. So, and after that, they have a direction for their promotion, attack milk. And then there's this the other chart that's pretty famous with that's a matrix with good versus evil, and the other axis is scared shitless versus fucking fearless. And what they did is they directly attacked milk dairy farmers. They got sued for it in Sweden and by the EU for being misleading to consumers, and that's actually a strategy. They got lots of media coverage for that, and they repeated exactly the same thing when they launched in the UK and then another time in the US. So there you have your that's 3 of the 4 P's. You have the product, you have the place, which is your distribution, you have a promotion strategy, and you might do some further analysis like who will buy it, who's our buyer persona, but that's really details. I wouldn't start with that if I were Oatly, and they didn't do it because they didn't have to put a price tag on this. Woolcraft didn't have to make a 100 pages strategy presentation for his CEO to be like, okay, you're worth your money, so now go ahead with the creative ideas.
There is an element to that, and I want to come back to kind of Oatly and other examples of different brands in a moment, but I think for any consultants or freelancers listening, there is a real, I'd almost call it bravery, and maybe bravery is overcooking it a little bit, but being brave enough to present just enough information. Like you said, sometimes there is often a pressure to, when you're charging a fee, to present lots of work to show that you have done the work for the money that they've given you, that you're being paid. And actually, it's really brave to take. I think was it Vegan Kennedy you said to just present 4 pages. There's a real, I think bravery is right. There's a real bravery to go into a presentation where you are pitching for big money, or you're presenting work that you've charged a lot for, and to say, right, okay, here's 4 slides. There's a bravery in that.
Yeah, but there's some tricks. You can actually avoid having it in your main presentation. Wheaton and Kennedy had an appendix, which was pretty long and all small print, just to prove that there's been a lot of thinking going into this, and we really talked about all the details, but you'll find them. Read it at home. And another tactic would be you make this big presentation and then you take 90% of it and just show, okay, we have it. We've done the work, but right now we are just going to talk about these 4 slides and then creative stuff. So you have a proof of work and or proof of effort, and then the other things.
Oh, you've destroyed it for me now. I'm just going to present 4 pages from here on.
But that's
Aris said 4 pages is fine.
No, it's another example is here we are talking about personas. Old Spice is very simple. It's they have one insight, and they have it right in the TVC. When he's addressing the audience, he's "Hello, ladies."
Yes, yeah.
So, and it's a very simple insight. It's men don't buy their own body wash.
Yeah. Cool.
So they either use their wife's body wash or their wives buy it.
Yeah. So that's where you.
So, and it's again, it's a very simple insight, but I think it's the first sentence. Hey, ladies, if you don't want your man to smell like lady-scented body wash.
Yeah. Yeah, and then,
it's like right out of the strategy playbook, and it doesn't have to be more complicated. And in this case, it really makes sense to use a persona to see, okay, who's using it, who's buying it, and I don't have to. Do I need a pen portrait? Do I need to know the favorite color, her favorite movie, all the stuff that goes into pen portraits?
I hate that.
Probably not, because it's too diverse. But
yes. I love a pen portrait, I persona work, but my absolute red line in this is that if it's not useful information, it doesn't go in. I don't care what their favorite color is or you know, how many times a week they go to a body pump class, unless of course it's for body pump. You know, their gym membership is of no interest to me. It's useful information that needs to go in there.
Yeah, but I think that the one issue I have with the pen portrait is you really get a good impression. It's almost like a real life person, but the problem is you exclude all the other persons. If it is too explicit, like you know what watch someone is wearing, brand of shoes, how he spent or she spends her holidays, and all the stuff like that, it excludes other people. It's like, okay, if he wears this watch, he won't wear another one. If he's driving this car, it's not the other car.
Yeah.
And that might be a problem. So,
yeah,
and very often it's just made up. So if you look at these pen portraits, it's something like a strategist in their mid-20s has to write a pen portrait about someone my age, probably. And he's like, okay, how would I like to be when I'm 50 years old?
There's a projection.
I'd like to have a cool place in London. I'd like to drive this car, this watch, this, all the things I can't afford today. And all this goes into this pen portrait. And then you have this really cool guy who's writing with a Mont Blanc for $1,000, all that stuff. And it's most of the time it's completely irrelevant.
Yeah. Made up nonsense. No, and I would say a bad pen portrait is terrible. You know, I think good ones, but I could probably say I've maybe only ever seen 2 good ones in 20-ish years of being in marketing. I can think of 2 that I remember seeing and going, this is really good work. And the rest of them have been, it's not a discipline that covers itself in glory. Let's put it that way. But
but nonetheless, you do it a lot in UX when you have to work with the consumer journey. Let's say someone wants to book a journey, the holiday, then you don't need to have details about the person. You have to have to think about what situation someone is in, what's the decision process, and you have to be honest. And when you are honest, it's also like, 100 people see the front page, don't find what they are looking for, and 95% are gone. Yeah. That's also part of a journey, and that's why I don't like the funnel, because a funnel assumes you put 100 people in and get 100 people out, like in the kitchen. But it's not the case. You're losing 99%
along the way. And
the interesting thing is, what do you do with the 99%? Do you focus on the 1%, or No? So it can be useful, but I think for general advertising, it's a bit too much.
I like funnels as a concept in that they can, especially when you're working with non-marketers, it's a very simple concept that can help them understand that people go through different stages when they get there. So certainly for board presentations and things like that, and especially because they seem to live, they can't, doesn't matter how many times people try and kill the funnel, it won't die, and it still makes it into MBAs and various things. So it's a concept that people seem to have a little bit of knowledge of. So it's something you can hang your hat on, and then you can talk them through how that works in their organization. So, but I do like to customize it to their customer journey a little bit. But the sort of broad concept of, look, we start here and end here as we move people through. But yeah, they're far from perfect. And
but I'm totally with you. It's a nice tool to work with, but it always depends what you're doing with it. And just to come back to Oatly, like, what's the funnel? The funnel is most people buy milk, so you have nearly 100% of the population. Some people actually do some research on the internet about milk. You can see that in Google Trends when you see the search volume, and some even research about Oatly. You can see that as well. So, but then there's a break, and they're watching TV, they go to work, all that stuff. So that there's a break, and then they go shopping, and then they might think about milk. Maybe not.
Yeah.
So you can use the funnel, but you have to be really precise, and you have to be honest. Yeah. People do some research, but it's not like I start with milk, I find Oatly, and then I go to the supermarket and buy it. Most people don't. They don't think about it until they are right in front of the shelf and are like, okay, what else do I need? Milk.
Yeah. It's a very low involved purchase, isn't it? It's a pick it up, put it in the basket, and on to the next thing.
And Oatly found a solution for that problem as well. They have a premium line that needs cooling, so it's placed in the dairy shelf right next to the milk. That's the reason why you want to have cooled products.
Yeah, so they
because I don't know how it's like in the UK, but in Germany, we have a corner in the supermarket where we have how is it called? Haarmilch, milk that doesn't need any cooling.
Oh, yeah, like UHT, ultra long life milk and things like that.
Yeah, long life milk and all that stuff. That's really low interest.
Yeah.
And you usually find that margarine, long life milk, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And this would normally be the place where you look for oat milk or any other stuff. So they worked hard to get into the dairy shelf because it has the highest profitability of any shelf, followed by frozen food and meat, I guess. But
so it's also I haven't done much with supermarkets for a few years, but the dairy aisle is also one of the highest footfall areas of a supermarket as well, isn't it? I think because it's the one thing people come and get in there. If they shop weekly, they go to that aisle always. If they're coming in just for a few items, it's usually the dairy aisle because it has a lifespan and you have to keep replacing it regularly. So it's one of the highest footfall areas in supermarkets, I think. But this is a few years ago when I saw that research. So
no, but it's still the case. And I don't know the exact numbers, but it's the most profitable category of anything in the supermarket because everybody buys something there. It may be cheese, milk, stuff like that.
Yeah,
and you can see it. We have a very strong habit of dairy consumption, so everybody's going to be there, and this is profitability is how they calculate what's going on the shelf and what's not. It's not margin or stuff like that. It's you can live with a very low margin if a product has a very high turnover.
Yeah,
the profit may be higher, and the margin doesn't really matter so much because when you have to pay for your products, you usually have sold them anyway.
Yeah.
So it's just cash in, cash out. So
yeah. Good. Well, look, you mentioned a few things about honesty in the last few minutes, and you mentioned cars a few times in some of your answers, which I'm going to use as a nice little segue into talk about the automotive sector, and particularly through maybe the lens of brand promise or brand purpose and things like that. Because I think you have some good thoughts on how companies maybe set these things up in strategic sessions. Maybe, we have a great brand purpose, but how that actually works on the ground when it's executed. Do you want to talk about that in any way and share some?
Yeah, I think I won't mention the brands, so
that's
I can
okay.
be more open about what we did there. The project was an evaluation and optimization of a partner marketing program, which means marketing directed towards the retailers, on behalf of these retailers, and some stuff retailers can use for their end consumers. So that's the context. And what we did is we looked into everything they did, which was quite complex because you have different audiences and different activities going on. And it was all about aftermarket sales and service, which is where they make their money.
Yeah.
And it used to be printing money when you were tied to your original parts and stuff like that, but EU regulation changed that, so it's basically a free market. And now you have competition, and you want to get this piece of the cake, which is where you, like I said, where you actually earn your money. It's aftermarket, it's service, inspection, all this stuff. And this certain client was commercial vehicles, so they have a little different audience. It's like people using cars professionally, which means you use them to carry fish from A to B. And it started out as a project where we did the evaluation, and then we were at a point where we said, okay, we have to talk to the retailers, we have to talk to your sales reps, and to get an idea of what they are doing, what their customers expect from them, all that stuff. And we also did some in-person interviews with some key retailers, and one was like, okay, let me start with a story, and then you can do your interview. And he told the story about a customer who had a custom built car with a, how do you say, cool box?
Yeah, like a refrigerated van.
Refrigerated truck. And he had like 2 tons of fish, let's say, and his car broke down. So he had 2 problems. My car broke down, and what about the fish?
Yeah.
And he was close to the factory, so he was like, yeah, good luck, I'm driving to the factory. And they wouldn't help him because it was a custom built car,
right?
And or custom built vehicle. And so he had to call a competitor. They showed up within 10 minutes. They had a replacement vehicle with a cool box, and they told him to Hamburg to have his car repaired. And the retailer was like, okay, what am I going to tell to my customers if this is your idea of service? This is the reality, and there's no way advertising can do anything about it.
Yeah.
So, and that talking about honesty, it was and bravery that went into the presentation.
Of course, yeah.
And some of the guys in the presentation already knew the story. They were with us on the interview, and some really went mad, like, can it be blah blah blah. So it's sometimes you have to accept that you can't change the world with advertising alone. There has to be, if you have a brand promise, like we have the best service for your commercial vehicle, you have to deliver.
Yep.
And especially when you have a competitor who does exactly that, who designs the complete thing around the needs of his commercial clients. And usually the special situation when you have a commercial vehicle is not, they don't really break down. You don't really have accidents or stuff like that. But the problem is, if you have, it's not the car that's the problem, it's what's inside the car or the vehicle. It's fish, it's meat, it's sometimes you have a special build. If you're a plumber, for example, you have all kinds of stuff in there. Shelves, sometimes a generator for electricity, all that stuff. So if you have a replacement car that doesn't have all this, you simply cannot work.
Yeah, and that's a bigger impact. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this is something, and advertising only makes it worse, because you give a promise and people know the reality. They walk up to the next retailer and they see, okay, it's not 24-hour, seven days a week. It's like they have a midday break. Yeah. They still have it in southern Germany. Northern Germany, not that much, but it happens that you walk to a shop in southern Germany and it's closed.
Oh dear, it's 2021. How do you get away with that? Do you think that this is a problem in bigger companies because there's such a gap between where the strategy is made and how it's delivered? And in any big company, when you have tens of thousands of employees or franchises and partnerships and things like that, it's difficult to embed that purpose throughout the business. Or is it just that nobody talks through the organization? Is it an operational thing, or is it just that the strategy and these things are done somewhere by people who never get their hands dirty?
I think it's, sometimes it might be silos. Sometimes it might be just a bad strategy in a sense. You don't face reality, you just make things up. So you take the product and there's no way this is, let's start another way. It's like, you don't have to make all these bold claims, but you like to make them. You really want these claims on your advertising. Maybe it's the agency, maybe it's the client themselves, and there's no need to make them. But as soon as they're out there, people start to take them seriously, and they look at the product and see, oh, that's so. And I think you always have to have this in mind. Is this really the best product? Can it deliver on this promise?
Yeah.
Or can we find another way to sell it?
Yeah. And that's it. I think that and we're back to where we started. Strategy and execution have to work hand in hand, because if they're not, you start making promises that the organization can never deliver. And as you said, advertising just makes it worse, because you keep making the promise and you keep failing to deliver it. So you actually perpetuate the issue. I think we've come full circle there and got back to the beginning, which seems like a good point. If you're watching this podcast on YouTube, which I know some people do, you'll probably notice two things. Firstly, we're both wearing a tie. I rarely wear a tie, rarely seen in a tie. But when you read Aris's bio on the show notes, you'll see that he never leaves home without a tie. So I thought I'd better improve my standards.
It changed during pandemic. It changed a bit, but usually not.
So I thought I'd smarten up a little bit for today. But the second thing you'll notice is that Aris has one of the most amazing book collections and bookshelves behind him. Now, part of the reason is that I think you came into advertising and marketing through a very different route, maybe to what the classic route could be. So can we talk about your background, and maybe that'll explain why the bookshelves are full of amazing things?
So first of all, these are not all mine.
Take the credit.
Mine are actually a bit further down, and there are some over there as well. So it's a long story. I when I finished school, I didn't know what to do, and I didn't have to go to the army because of some health issues, and so I had to make a quick decision. And at that time, I thought it was a good idea to study classical guitars, become a soloist. And after some years, I realized this will not work.
It's a horrible realization, isn't it?
It's like, yeah, it's even worse than aspiring to become a famous footballer, because you know, there are 20 teams with 20 players, so it's 400 in the Premier League. Classical guitar, most people couldn't even name one. So yeah, and I've always been interested in photography and stuff like that. So I decided to change paths, and I started at a small publishing house in Hamburg as a photographer, and then they realized, oh, we might be able to teach him some writing, so we're going to save some money when we sent him somewhere. And I did that for some years, and it was a really small place with magazines mostly about sports like skateboarding, snowboarding, and stuff like that. And so there was a lot of room for experimentation. So I started to do some art direction, and the last position I had was editor-in-chief and art director. And from that on, I moved to Universal with a colleague. Did still editorial stuff, but online. So that's when I came in contact with computers and online professionally. I've used them before, but so, and yeah, after that, Universal moved to Berlin. I didn't want to move to Berlin, so I stayed in Hamburg and switched again, and was looking for a job. And I was like, okay, why not try advertising? And my first agency, or the first agency I worked for, had some B2B clients. We were doing a lot of magazines, but also classical advertising. So I started with the editorial stuff, where I came from, and then moved towards classical copywriting, and I've always been the type of guy to ask all these why questions. So if you have a brief, I was always like, okay, and don't tell me the task, tell me what we want to achieve, so we might find a better way. So, and then, yeah, this is how the things evolved into strategy. And next stage was digital stuff. And that was at an agency that didn't really have a strategy department, so you had to be your own strategist. And when you're doing like websites, platforms, integrated campaigns, things become more and more complicated. And that's how I really started to do strategy first for myself, because I needed some kind of plan to do my job. And then it became more and more strategy focus, but I still did a lot of UX stuff, like doing all the consumer journeys, and yeah, so that's my background.
And that different background, you know, classical guitar is you're probably the first person I've met who've studied classic guitar, and you also studied English and German literature as well. Did that sort of different background into working in strategy and advertising, do you think that helped give you a different perspective to maybe somebody who's just come up through the agency model?
Yeah, I think I really did learn some things for my second life, so to say. You learn a lot about professionalism and the cult of genius. And you become very humble. If you work with professional musicians, it's some talent, of course, but it's a lot of hard work. And it's a different approach to this genius versus professionalism, workmanship, all that stuff. So it's not about doing something till you get it right. It's doing something till you can't get it wrong. It's not I'm having a good day and I'm doing brilliant stuff. That's a bit of luck involved. It's I'm having a bad day and I'm still doing okay.
I love that. Yeah, love it.
So, and yeah, that's one thing. And yeah, and you're becoming more humble. I've met a lot of great musicians like Leonard Bernstein, and it's not that easy. You don't call people. You are not that. How do you say? It's not that easy to call something brilliant or genius or something if you met Leonard Bernstein. So this is a genius. And then what we do is advertising.
That's the clip I'm using in the promotion.
In Lübeck, they have a summer university at the College of Music, and everybody eats together. So that's where I met him. And,
yeah.
He came with his tray and he was like, "Is this place free? Okay, I'm Leonard."
Brilliant. Honestly, that's been used in a promo. It's hard to call it. This is just advertising when you.
And another thing you learn is the better people are at what they do, the more humble they are. They are always nice people. So the mad genius throwing things, screaming around, that's really rare.
Yeah,
I've met it once, twice, maybe, but not really.
Brilliant. We're coming towards the end of the interview, Aris. So which brings us to the usual questions. Now I know you have there's a number of books that you've talked about, and we've got a list in the show notes of great books that people should look at. What one or two from that list of books that you would recommend are kind of the ones that you always come back to? What are your favorites from that?
It's too very old-fashioned. It's more about the guys than about the books. It's Ogilvy and Gossage, because they were so different. And I think when you read something about advertising, you'll notice after the third or fourth book, it's more or less always the same. So if you've read Ogilvy or Gossage, Gossage is a bit different because it's not the typical advertising guy. Yeah. But you learn a lot about advertising. It's really old school. It's way before the internet, but it's very interesting. And Gossage, for example, was a pretty honest guy. He did advertising for petrol stations. He was like, "What do you expect me to do?" People see the ad and they drive miles to buy your petrol, which is exactly like the petrol they get anywhere else. Yeah. So that's pretty interesting, and I think I always recommend these because they are at least better written than most of what you can find today. And then there's, just in case you can't find the book of Gossage, there's a book by Steve Harrison about Gossage. So that's really interesting too.
And I think
you can watch Mad Men. Mad Men teaches a lot about advertising because all the cases they show, it's real advertising from DDB. Interestingly, most of the campaigns they show and that are assigned to Don Draper are actually created by women.
Which is, it's true, isn't it, that there's a lot more women involved in advertising in the past than you would have.
Back then, in the 60s, it was among copywriters, I guess it was 50%. Dave Dye has a series about the woman who built DDB, and all the stuff you see in Mad Men. It's real campaigns made by DDB and created by female copywriters.
We'll put a link to that in the show notes as well, because I think you've shared some of the things on LinkedIn before for that.
I'll send you the link to Dave's.
So if you're listening, check the show notes wherever you're listening, and there'll be links to all these in there that you can click and have a read around. I do like it when we get classic books and older books as recommendations, because I think sometimes there's a lot of talk of the world's changing, marketing's changing, advertising's changing, but when you study it, a lot of it's still broadly the same, right? Maybe some of the tactical implementations have changed, but the principles of the discipline are the same as they were, as they ever were, I think. Yeah,
it changes a bit, but I think as you said it, the principles are more or less the same, and you have to sell the new stuff. So let's write a book. And but in a way, if you've read Ogilvy or some other stuff, and this is really true for most of the stuff that's written about advertising. Most of the books are quite okay, and you get the picture how it works. And if you like, read something about MySpace or TikTok or Foursquare.
Foursquare and MySpace. And for the younger listeners, you'll have to ask your granddad what they have. Foursquare and MySpace. I remember.
That's
I remember
the
all
problem.
of them.
Like you read about TikTok today, and it's gone tomorrow. So, but the principle is the same.
Still the same. Great stuff. And look, one last question for you, Aris. Question I ask everybody. What one question do you usually get asked that I haven't asked you today?
Can't think of any.
It usually means we've done such a superb job with the interview and the discussion that we've covered all the ground.
So you sent me this question actually, and I thought about it, and I was like, it would be unfair to come up with a question you didn't ask before we did the podcast. So no, from the top of my head, no.
That's not a problem. No problem. So, and where's the best place for people who want to get in touch with you or follow you? Is it LinkedIn? Is that the best place to find you?
That would be LinkedIn. I don't have a website. I have some other profiles, but on Facebook I only share dog photos with other owners of Cocker Spaniels. So
and listen,
and it's everything private. I think wouldn't even find me on Facebook. Yeah. So it's mainly LinkedIn.
Listen, what you'll probably get now is a lot of LinkedIn requests with people asking, "Can I follow you on Facebook to see the Cocker Spaniel pictures?"
Yeah, I've been quite inactive for a while because my dog had some health issues and I got a little bit bored with it. So but I'm post more frequently in the future.
Brilliant. And there's a link again to Aris's LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Click on that, and as I say, it's I love the insight, I love the thoughts, and I love the discussion and the debate that you generate, which all comes from a great place, which you can't say about everybody on LinkedIn. So thank you for that, and I look forward to engaging in the future on LinkedIn and hopefully in person one day as well.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Aris, thank you very much for coming on the strategy
Thank you for having me.
And we shall hopefully meet again at some point in the future.
Yeah, that would be nice.